oppression of the poor, please rise up, Shiloh Abba. Right now, be a refugee in the time of trouble. Consider our troubles and our suffering against those.
We say as always, peace and blessing, shalom. To the brothers and the sisters, today we will be dealing with some basic fundamentals pertaining to, the so-called Native American Indian brothers and sisters. This is not about hatred. This is not about racism, which is just another term used to disguise the practice of Satanism. This is not about black or white. It's about what is true and correct. This information will not redeem you. It will not save you. I must say, just to understand that we are people of color, which they consider black, is not the application of the true supreme being, understanding, most high power, who some call the Great Spirit, or rather the term God. This is not the correct understanding that will cause the Almighty Father, supreme being, to extend his salvation of mercy to you and me. This is based upon truth versus all the lies. Our situation and circumstances is much more deeper than just understanding, or rather saying that I'm a black man, I'm a black woman, I am the original race. That is not going to cut it when it comes to what the Almighty Father, Supreme Creator, requires that you and I must do. So-called Native American Indian brothers and sisters. Because today you are the star of the show. You have some Israelites, brothers and sisters, that are saying that the so-called Native American Indians are not related to us. For the simple fact, they do not understand the history. Also for the simple fact, which we do understand, because all the falsehood images that they have recorded in their history books of deception, like the one we're looking at here today. Just like the name Indian, Native American Indian. There's no such people as Native American Indian. You will not find any ancient ethnic biblical nation identified by the name Native American Indian in ancient biblical BC time. Neither will you find any nation in ancient biblical times identified, as Negroes. Neither will you find also in ancient biblical time not one nation of people, identifying themselves as African. Which the term Africa, is just derived from this Roman general by the name of Leo Scipios Africanus, who conquered Hannibal's military. And Scipios Africanus, his name was placed on the continent of Ham, with the term Africa. Now concerning the Sioux battle, with General Crook, it was known as the Sioux Battle of the Rosebud. In the history books, they show the so-called Native American Indians as Caucasian, so-called white people, which there is no such people in ancient time known also as white people or Caucasian. You will not find one nation in ancient times identifying themselves as Caucasian or white people. Now here's a picture of the man who went by the name of General George Crook, who fought in the battle against the so-called Sioux Native American Indians, which was known as the Battle of Rosebud. But before the Atlantic slave trade, before 1502, before so-called Queen Isabella, Ferdinand, Hernan Cortez, and Christopher Columbus ever came out of their mother's womb, before our past original so-called Native American Indian sisters were raped, before the invasion, before Custer Douglas came, many years ago, this is how the original so-called Cherokees used to look. This is a picture of one of our past ancestors by the name of Bill Pickett, on the left, and on the right Here's a clear original image of our past so-called Cherokee brother, and not those falsehood actors that falsely portrayed the false image of what they call Native American Indians in those 1970 TV shows pertaining to John Wayne. And pertaining to the photo that we just showed you, you can find that photo in a book called The Indian, Black, and Hidden Heritage on page 20. Pertaining to our past original so-called Cherokee ancestors, which we are related to them. So this is what we're dealing with historically. As Psalm chapter 52 verse 4 explains, Thou loveth all devouring words, lies, O thou deceitful tongue. All the way down to the falsehood images, like the one we're looking at right now on page 6, which is supposed to be a representation of what they call the Kiowa preachers of the Baptist Church, which this is more of a European stock. But here we have on the opposite side of the coin a original image of what they call a Kiowa sister. Yes, this is our sister, who went by the name of Diana Fletcher. This is before, and this is what you have after many years of our sisters being raped, and falsely labeled as Indians, which there's no such people that ever existed in the history of ancient biblical times. I have to say, before we proceed any further, Jacob, in English, Jacob had 12 sons, which our so-called Native American Indian brothers and sisters, are descended from ancient Jacob's bloodline, which they will not understand that right now. It's going to take the immortality of Almighty Father to open up their understanding, because they're suffering from a mental curse, all of us, because of historical sins against the Great Spirit. This has nothing to do with religion. All that has been done is the enemy gave us a false interpretation and false understanding and twisted the information upside down to deceive us and mislead us, which is a biblical curse that the Great Spirit executed upon our nation, whether we call ourselves Native American Indian or so-called Negro. As Isaiah chapter 65 verse 15 explains, ye shall leave your name, your biblical name, for a curse. Native American Indian is a cursed name. Deuteronomy chapter 32 verse 26 further explains the situation of this matter as well. I said I would scatter them into the corners, and we're scattered north, south, east, and west. Some of us are living in the slums and the shanty towns. Some of us are scattered on the reservations, as it still remains today in this 21st century. And this was predicted in biblical times. I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. And no longer do our so-called Native American Indian brothers and sisters remember who they really were in ancient biblical time, accordingly to the original ethnic true identity that the Supreme Creator, Great Spirit, gave them before they was labeled with this falsehood title called Native American Indian, Kiowa, Blackfoot, Cherokee, Shinnecock, Seminolean, or rather so-called Wampanoag. The Most High also caused that understanding of truth to cease out of the minds of the other nations as well, as Deuteronomy chapter 32 verse 26 proclaims. How the Father said, the Great Spirit said, he would scatter them, us, into the corners, and I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men, from among the other nations as well. Let's go to a clipping pertaining to one of our so-called Wampanoag brother by the name of Darrell, who is so-called African American descendant and so-called Wampanoag, Native American Indian descendant, which are basically two falsehood identities, which represents the curse, which the Creator, Supreme Being, Great Spirit, okay, put this curse on our mind because of historical, okay, evil disobedience against his laws. Deuteronomy 28 verse 46. And there shall be upon thee for a sign inside our minds, inside our thoughts, and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever, which means for a temporary dispensation of time until the judgment sentence is up. Yes, indeed. So let's give our brother Daryl, okay, a moment of time to hear what he has to say. Yes, a brother who is a descendant of our nation, okay, falsely labeled as Indian in Wampanoag.
My name is Daryl Wixon, and I am half black and Wampanoag. My dad was known to many people as a Sachem, which in our language, if you translate that into English, would be a chief. And he worked a lot for the benefit of the people. And he believed strongly in that way of thinking. And because he had that strength in that direction, he instilled that into us as his children.
Now, in the history books, they give you the false images of what they call the Wampanoag. But notice, okay, on his upper arm, you see what is known as the Shield of David, which was a symbol that the Aztecs and the so-called original Mexicans, they carried, which is also a symbol that the ancient Hebrews used to carry. Which also you'll see this symbol, which they call the Shield of David, found among the past Moorish ancestors, like this picture that we're showing you here today. Okay, on his garment you see what is known today as the Shield of David, which is a symbol that have also been used, okay, in satanic ritualistic practices. But inside these distorted, okay, history books, it explains the Roman SHEMITES, meaning the falsehood understanding, the falsehood image, their version of the first meeting between the pilgrims, so-called pilgrims, Governor John Carver, and the Wampanoag chief, which this is a pictorial image of the distorted truth. This is supposed to be Governor John Carver having a meeting with the Wampanoag chief, because they had chiefs among them, just like the ancient Hebrews, with the Shield of David, okay, on his arm, which is a clue image, symbol, which will lead you back to the Hebrew bloodline pertaining to who the so-called Wampanoag Indians really are, accordingly to truth. Let's go to another one of our brothers by the name of Charles Crossley, who claims the title African American, Mohawk, and Blackfoot, which our beloved brother Charles Crossley, who is a descendant of our nation, okay, explains how if you're not depicted in the image that they have selected in Hollywood pertaining to these images, okay, in these John Wayne movies, or what they falsely call what an Indian is, you're not recognized or respected. Like this image that we're looking at here today, which is supposed to be Geronimo, who is supposed to be from the Apache tribe, an Apache leader. No way when it comes to dealing with truth, this is not how, okay, the original so-called Apache looked. This is a more original image of the so-called Apache brothers before the invasion, okay, in their ceremony celebrating when a little girl becomes a young woman, when she reaches her puberty stage. And this is a distorted image of the so-called Apaches, which the history books records this individual named to be Geronimo. What we have here is an offspring of the European stock, just like this other visual clipping that we're looking at right now, and pretty much, okay, of the European stock They are basically maintaining the Hebrew heritage customs, okay, pertaining to their dress code, which goes back to the book of Numbers, chapter 15, verse 38 to verse 41, which speaks about the fringes, other known as the tassels, okay, that the ancient Hebrews, okay, decked out on their past garments. Now, just like our brother Charles Crossley stated, the reason why people cannot accept the fact that the so-called Native American Indians are brothers and sisters of color, and that we're related to them, and that they are not no Indians, and what they call Indians, okay, are really Hebrews, because we all been brainwashed too long. And by the way, this is a picture of the original so-called Indians in California. You see? And we are brothers. They just have been brainwashed out of their true ancient identity. The same way some of the so-called Hebrew Israelite brothers that don't know the true history. And we understand when they see all these false images, well, that's not an Indian. That's not a so-called Native American Indian. That is a Hebrew brother whose ancient identity have been stripped out of his mind. And the sisters too as well. Just like the title African American. Just like the title African. Just like the title Caucasian. These are all brainwashing false titles. Just like what they call the Bat Creek Stone, which they found in 1889, okay, at a burial, Easton, Tennessee, which is where, okay, several of our past ancestors once dwelt, who was falsely labeled as, okay, Indians. And they carved several Hebrew letters on this stone, which they found, okay, at a burial, eastern of Tennessee. And for us that know the basic fundamentals of Hebrew, this is the letter Yah. That's the letter Yah. That is a Ra. So the question that I pose here, what is the past generation of our past ancestors who were falsely called Native American Indians, what are they doing carving Hebrew letters on a stone, which they found in the geographical location of Easton, Tennessee for the year of 1889? 1 + 1 = 2. I'll let you figure it out. There's a man by the name of James Adair. I think he was a fur trader. He dwelt among what they call the Native American Indians for around 30 years, and he recorded, okay, their customs just like a journalist, and he recorded his experiences that he physically experienced with our past ancestors. And this is what he had to say. On page 180, he stated that the Indians, so-called Indians, he said, the manner of curing their sick, just like it states in the book of James, chapter 5, verse 15, how we're supposed to acquire to the Almighty Father when there's a sick brother or sister among us, or child. So James Adair, okay, during his experience, okay, of dwelling for a period of time among our brothers and sisters, he speaks about the so-called Native American Indians. Their manner of curing their sick brothers and sisters is very similar, okay, to that of the Hebrews, not Jews. There's no J in the ancient Hebrews. He states how they always invoke Yahweh. What is the so-called Native American Indians doing, evoking the Most High Creator, Yahweh? Of course, we know there's no E in the ancient Hebrew because they add the E as well as the J. And if you check out their old past ceremonial chants, when they perform what is known as the rain dance, which was basically them showing their respect to the Almighty Father Creator, who they call God, for sending the rain down on the earth to bless their crops to grow. You'll find the Hebrew alphabet. Yes, indeed. Yah, 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 Yah. And you'll also find them chanting the alphabet Ha, Ha, Yah, Ha, Ha, Ha. And you'll also find them chanting the Hebrew alphabet, Wah, Wah, Yah, Ha, Wah. Just like this sister here. Okay, from this photograph we're looking at right now. And I met this sister about 5, 6, 7 years ago while attending what they call a Shinnecock powwow upstate in the Hamptons. Now, I was able to explain to one of our so-called Shinnecock sisters, okay, why the brothers and sisters fell and why the Great Spirit allowed them as well as us to be brought down into captivity. Which the explanation of this situation can all be explained in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 20. Because of the wickedness of our historical wickedness of thy doings of our forefathers as it still remains today, whereby thou, you and me, and our past ancestors, whereby thou hast forsaken me. The me represent the Great Spirit, the Most High, Ancient of Days, Yahweh, who they falsely call God today. Forsaken what? Forsaken his laws, statutes, and commandments. Like Leviticus chapter 25, verse 5. History records for 1512, Pope Julius II. Not as though we need Pope Julius II words to confirm truth versus lies, but just for the record of understanding's sake. History records brown-skinned, befeathered people, talking about our so-called Native American Indian brothers and sisters, past ancestors. In 1512, Pope Julius II, he proclaimed that the so-called Indians were children of Adam and Eve. Now, of course, Adam and Eve never existed because of these reasons. Psalm chapter 52, verse 2. The tongue deviseth mischief like a sharp razor, working deceitfully. The fourth verse. Thou lovest all devouring words of lies and deception. O thou deceitful tongue on earth. Ecclesiastes chapter 37, verse 3. O wicked imagination, whence cometh thou? Into cover the earth with deceit. Let's go to this next clipping from this movie titled The Uncle Tom's Cabinet to give us some more visual, images pertaining to our so-called Native American Indian ancestors who we are related to as well.
What are they doing here? They're Indians.
This is one of my many unsuccessful experiments. You see, with Indians, there's absolutely nothing to be done. There's the same difference between a Negro and an Indian as there is between a dog and a coyote. You can put a dog on a leash, beat him, and he'll always be there to lick your feet. Take away a coyote's liberty and you've cut off his air. An Indian will never be a slave. No one has ever been able to make them reproduce in captivity.
So there you have it, brothers and sisters. More images of our so-called Native American Indian ancestors, But going back to this book called Black Native American Indian Heritage, on page 39, they give you a watered-down picture, of the so-called Native American Indian brothers and the so-called Negro Afro-American brother dwelling in the same village in harmony and peace. Now, in their history text, they will falsely claim that the so-called Native American Indians, one day he met a so-called African American brother and they became friends. That is a lie. If we was able to resurrect a so-called Native American Indian brother from the 1300s and the 1200s, they would tell you that they know that they are related to the so-called Negro Afro-American brothers and sisters. You see, just like it states in Hebrews the 13th chapter around the first verse, let brotherly love continue. In 1685, when Africans, so-called African Americans, and native, so-called Native American Indians, slaves escaped together. They formed a Maroon Society. For 8 generations, the Dutch armed forces tried to crush their community. You see, we don't understand this portion of history. The so-called Maroons and the so-called African Americans, okay, past ancestors, they band together. Coming from this hidden heritage of the Indians book on page 29, it records the first so-called Africans, there's no such people, brought to the new world known as America by the Europeans, slavers. They probably arrived in April 1502 aboard the ship that brought the new governor of Hispaniola, Nicholas de Ovando. Let's continue. Soon after they landed, the so-called African American past ancestors and the slave master, some Africans, so-called African Americans, they escaped, okay, to the woods and found a new home among the Native Americans. Yes, the villages of our past ancestors, okay, the so-called Native American Indian brothers and sisters that took the so-called African American brothers and sisters into their village when they was running for their life to escape the slave master after they was deported from what is known today as the west coast of Africa, which they sojourned for a dispensation of time, as page 39 depicts. The so-called Afro-American past ancestors of ours fled down into the villages of the Seminolean brothers and sisters in Florida. And they band together like a rubber band, and they stuck together, and they loved each other, and they cared about each other, and they supported each other, and they fought against the enemy for the welfare of the brothers and sisters of our nation. Not Negro or Native American Indian, a nation of people who have been brainwashed. Here's a picture of one of our past, okay, so-called Cheyenne Indian ancestors. Her name was Eliza Stewart. She was sent into prison in the 1800s for shooting at someone. You can find her image in this book called The Black Pioneers by John W. Ravage. Forget about the John Wayne cowboys and Indian fake images. In the year of 1837, Osceola, a so-called Native American Indian brother, he had become the leader of the black and the red resistance. There ain't no such thing as no red Indians. That's a byword in proverb. As Deuteronomy chapter 28 verse 37, okay, predicted that we would be labeled with these false identities like red man, black man, Afro-American man, Cherokee man, Indian man. So Osceola, he was one of the main leaders, resistance of the U.S. slaveholders. Now check out what we're about to read here today is being repeated all over once again in our history of time. While the Seminolean nation, so-called Seminolean nation, okay, as a whole, they were showing signs of division, just like we are repeating these same old divisions here today through hatred, strife, and conflict. Those who rode with Osceola, okay, such as Wildcat, were prepared to defend their black brothers and sisters to the death, which all has been erased out of our minds and replaced with a whole bunch of foolishness. And most of us really don't care anymore. This is a so-called Negro Indian chief by the name of Mikan-Ofa. The Seminoleans, when they went down to the territory of Mississippi, they found themselves at the mercy of what they call the Five Nations, such as the Creek Nations, such as the Chickasaw and the Choctaw, and some of the so-called Creek Nations. They were being used as instruments of the slave masters to target, to track down, to hunt, and to kill the so-called Seminolean brothers and sisters and the so-called African American past ancestors, brothers and sisters. But this was not all so-called Native American Indian brothers and sisters doing this. They don't explain this situation correctly. The same way you had some wicked, evil so-called African American Uncle Tom's satanic Negroes that was enemies against the brothers and sisters as well. And some of these so-called Choctaw, Chickasaws, these so-called Creek, just like the Uncle Tom so-called Negro that used to live in the White House, the big house, they took a bribe from the slave master. Exactly just like the part that Samuel Jackson played, okay, in this movie called The Django. The wicked, evil, supreme Uncle Tom house nigger that used to live in the big house that did not give a damn about the suffering of his brothers or sisters. But it was written that this would happen to the so-called Native American Indians, as well as the so-called Negro. Genesis 49 verse 19 speaks about how a troop, like the cavalry troop, like the military in Florida, that fought against the Seminolean brothers and sisters and the so-called Negro in the 1800s, like the war with Custer Douglas. For the reason that 1 Ezra chapter 8 verse 86 speaks about, how all this has befallen us is done unto us for our wicked works and our great sins. Historically, 2 Ezra chapter 1:25, seeing ye have forsaken me, the Most High Creator, I will forsaken you as well. Which Deuteronomy chapter 33 verse 20 gives us a description of the so-called Native American Indians. How they used to wear the crown, the chiefs, and they would take one of the feathers to cut the flesh of their brother to represent their covenant of brotherhood. Just like 1 Chronicles chapter 12 verse 8 gives us another description of our past ancestors who were falsely labeled as Native American Indians, which a lot of them were tall, a lot of them were warriors before they fell, the woman and the men. In the states and of the Gadites, they separated themselves unto David into the hole to the wilderness, just like they ran into the wilderness for refuge. So it says, and of the Gadites, they separated themselves unto David into the hole to the wilderness, men of might and men of war. Yes, indeed, the so-called Maroons, the Seminoleans, those brothers was warriors. And they was warriors of true brotherhood. Yes, they had their fault, just like every other man and woman have their fault. So they were men of war. They were fit for the battle, that could handle shield and buckler, whose faces were like the faces of lions. Like they used to put the war paint on their face, okay, to make themselves look like lions. When they used to go into their guerrilla warfare in the woods for survival. And it also says they were as swift as the roe upon the mountain. It says that they were swift, they were fast on their feet, like a roe, which is a deer in the mountains. Which history records, okay, artist George Catlin, who used to draw images of the so-called Native American Indian brothers in their royal regalia, with the crown, the moccasins, and the pants. The artist, George Catlin, from his observation of research, he also concludes that the so-called Native American Indians' customs are in sequential harmony with the ancient Hebrew customs. The artist George Catlin, he wrote on a exceptional concerning the so-called Kiowa, okay, Native American Indians. He said that they were near 7 feet in stature. They were very tall because men in ancient times were much more taller than the men here today in modern times. And you got many giant bones found in India and different parts of South America to confirm these facts. George Catlin stated how the so-called Kiowa Native American Indian brothers and sisters, they used to stand up 7 feet in stature tall, who purportedly how they could run down and slay a buffalo on their feet. They used to could run a buffalo down on their feet and catch him and kill him for necessity, not excess. In the original Kiowa, so-called Apache, Cherokee, Cheyenne, Shinnecock, Hopi, the Pueblos, they were not of European stock. They look just like you and me. We're talking about the original brothers and sisters that came over here from the Middle East to what is known today as North America. Way before Custer Douglas, Christopher Columbus, Ferdinand, Isabella was even born out of their mother's womb. You see, they had woolly hair and brown skin just like you and me here today. Like I said before, this is not about racism or black and white. It's about the truth. Because their image and their character, has been marginalized and assassinated and oppressed. For the history of so-called Black History Month, you see many of the so-called Native American Indians, men and women, throughout the course of history, throughout different generations, they begin to forsaken the Great Spirit, the Creator, who they call God. They begin to worship the sun. They used to run these hooks through their chest and blow fire out the mouth to worship Satan. Just like this image that I'm giving you here today. And they have these images recorded in the museum. They begin to paint their bodies. They begin to put these demonic satanic dinner plates in their lips, which is very painful, which represents them worshiping Satan. This was the beginning of their downfall. Then it went from one level of evil to another level of evil. They began to go into tribal conflict. They began to kill each other. They began to declare war on their own brothers and sisters, until the Almighty Father allowed them to be taken down. Anytime you're constantly fighting and killing and doing things like this, putting these satanic plates inside your lips, all kind of evil, it's just a matter of time before that nation fall, which has happened to our nation. Forget about Native American Indians and so-called Negro, and so-called Puerto Rican, and so-called Haitian, and so-called Brazilian, and so-called Mexican, and so-called Afro-Caribbean, and so-called Afro-Peruvian. We all come from the same nation, and we're speaking these different dialects because of our historical disobedience against the one that they call God here today, which is only for a dispensation of time. The so-called Native American Indians are related to us, even though some of them in this generation of time think they are not, because they've been brainwashed in their oppression as well, and also because of pride. But the Almighty Father is going to clear up all this confusion one day and put the whole world back into proper perspective. Here's the image of one of our past Seminolean past ancestors who once dwelled in Pensacola, Florida. Here's another image of one of our past ancestors from 1835 who went by the name of Abraham. Yes, a so-called Negro, as would be known today. Brother Abraham, he rose up in power among the so-called Seminolean brothers and sisters. He became the prime minister. He became the counselor. He became a principal chief among the so-called Seminolean brothers and sisters. You see, he became an advisor. And the so-called Seminolean brothers and sisters would not make a move without Brother Abraham's consent. Also, when you read into the antiquities of the so-called Cherokees, it makes mention how the so-called Cherokees make mention, stating that Abraham is one of their ancestors that taught them to pray with their hands raised up to the sky towards the east. So we're going to conclude on this token, and this shall be the end of the so-called Black History Month pertaining to the so-called Native American Indians, brothers and sisters. Baruch chapter 1 verse 13. Pray for us also unto the great spirit which they call Lord and God, the Most High. For we have sinned against the Most High, the great spirit, who they call Lord and God here today. Our God, the great spirit, the Almighty Father of immortality. And unto this day, the fury of the Almighty Father, great spirit, and his wrath is not turned from us.
A lot of the Indians would go out and pick up potatoes during the harvest of the potato season, because there was huge potato farms, and some of them would refer to the Narragansetts as the potato niggers. If you were not white, you were black.
We were sitting on a plane one day, my wife and I talking Cherokee, and a lot of the African Americans didn't know what we were. A lot of the Hispanics didn't know if we were Jamaican or Cuban or Latino, and the white passengers of the plane certainly didn't have a clue, because that's the first time they ever heard Cherokee spoken. So we thought that's unique. You know, it takes a Cherokee to understand Cherokee. So I thought that was real amusing. We sitting on the plane talking, everybody staring at us. I don't think they were staring at us because I was black and Indian. They were staring at us because they didn't know what we were saying, conversing.
I guess the way it works is people are so used to seeing what is depicted as an Indian within the movies, the old movies and things. So if you don't look that way, they don't expect you to be Indian. They think you're either black or Hispanic or something else. But most people don't perceive you as an Indian if you don't look like that poster type Indian that they have on TV.
For the oppression of the poor man, please rise up, Abba Shiloh. Be our refugee in the time of trouble. Consider our troubles and our suffering against those that hate us with cruelty. Let their mischief return into the very own bosom.
You see, with Indians, there's absolutely nothing to be done.
Be not far from us, for trouble is near, yeah. And no other, yes, can what deliver us. And no man can keep his own soul alive. In the valley of the shadows of death, arise, great prince, yes, of the host, and let the wickedness come to an end, yeah. And let the portion of his cup be filled up with fire, and let the angels go before our presence. Forsaken not me, yes, I'm the brokenhearted, for we are, yes, your creation, and you have commanded us to wait patiently. But in faith we ask you to fight our battle, as in the ancient times, Exodus 14:14. Great glory and honor to the great prince. Mercy, gratitude, redemption, we pray every day. We say, Shiloh, great prince, please help us. Help us, 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 redemption, help us, redemption, help us, redemption, help us, redemption, 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 to the 12 tribes, redemption, 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 to the 12 tribes, redemption, Shiloh, Abba, the Nazarene, Abba, Nazarene, Shiloh, redemption, to the 12 tribes, the 12 tribes, the 12 tribes, redemption, to the 12 tribes, Shiloh, Shiloh, the Nazarene, Shiloh, the Nazarene, Shiloh, the Nazarene.
way it works is people are so used to seeing what is depicted as an Indian within the movies, the old movies and things. So if you don't look that way, they don't expect you to be Indian. They think you're either black or Hispanic or something else. But most people don't perceive you as an Indian if you don't look like that poster type Indian that they have on TV.